Hey, how's it going? My name is Stev, and I'm here to talk with you about an equally interesting and honestly discouraging topic. Today, we are going on a journey of learning about all the weird and sometimes brutal ways women's bodies and sexuality were viewed across history. A quick disclaimer that this video is a project for my human sexuality course, but to all the randoms that may come across this on public YouTube, you should know this too. That being said, get cozy and let me take you back to a time when opening your mouth as a woman could have disastrous consequences. Our first story begins in 17-something Europe, where a peculiar event began to occur. In terms of Victorian standards, women were typically seen as chaste beings who were gentle and of very few words. Naturally, trouble began to stir when the average housewife began to have strange desires to not only speak her mind, but also frequent lustful thoughts. Suddenly, women were plagued with such fervent sexual desires that a need for an explanation became desperate. Medical scholars of the time took inspiration from Latin texts to explain this phenomenon. The term, and I'm about to butcher this pronunciation, furor uterinis, or madness of the womb, became a popular explanation. According to local legend, women suffering from the disease would run up and down the streets professing such immense desire that death or compensation was the only answer. Doctors began to ponder what could possibly cause such hysteria in the local women population. Some theories were proposed, such as an excessive amount of women being around, overindulgence in luxury, and reading in general. You know what they say, if you find your wife with a book, she's either a witch or sexually frustrated. Strangely enough, abstinence was a popularly considered explanation, so we have to give them points there. One of the most popular theories for the disease stems from ancient Greece, the idea of the wandering uterus. If any of you have taken a general psychology class, you will probably know what I'm talking about. It was a common belief that the uterus was able to move about the body on its own in search of semen, often causing significant stress and even death. A common remedy for this was a massage performed by a physician in hopes of returning it to its proper place. However, this was not the only supposed cure to excessive female desire. If a woman was deemed to be a nymphomaniac or appeared to be excessively masturbating, an extreme procedure known as clitoridectomy would be performed. This surgery involved removing the clitoris to hopefully reduce these emotions. So, all in all, a terrible time to have an opinion as a woman. Speaking of strange medical solutions, our next story will take us on a journey of discovering how the vibrator was invented. Many of you from class will recall this story, so it will be no surprise I am including it here. I hope to clear up a few misconceptions commonly believed about its invention. As opposed to other solutions from the time, the vibrator was actually not invented to cope with hysteria. While the popular story involves doctors using the device as a means to satiate women from delirium, the first version was actually invented by Dr. Joseph Mortimer Grandeville in hopes of alleviating pain in men. The use was not inherently sexual and not advertised to the public until the early 1900s. Even then, they were marketed as wrinkle prevention in both men and women. The one who was responsible for the sexual use of vibrators was Betty Dodson, who began to use them in sex workshops. Despite the truth being less dramatically compelling, it highlights that in this rite, women had autonomy over their own sexuality. Finally, a good note, right? Well, that isn't going to last long, as the next story, or rather person we are going to talk about, is genuinely horrifying. The man who haunts the dreams of all psychology students, Sigman Freud. While Freud's influence on modern psychology is undeniable, he's far better known for being a freak. Famous for both psychoanalysis and the Oedipus complex, Freud had complicated views on both people and women in general. The Oedipus complex was the idea that children are naturally inclined to be attracted to the parent of the opposite sex. While this is absurd enough, Freud also believed women were not their own sex, but rather men without genitals. Therefore, this resulted in the thought process that women suffered from apparent penis envy. This was why Freud believed women behaved the way they did, and that this envy could be cured by having a child, specifically a boy. Therefore, women's behavior was inherently sexual and existed to simply chase masculinity. While this idea was later criticized and passed down over time from being considered a metaphor to then being an absurd belief, this example is still one of the most ridiculous ways women's sexuality was seen. While now we are far more educated and can laugh at these ideas, it's important to reflect on how they have affected society. It's terrifying to think that there was a time some guy could say women only existed to want to be a man, and for this idea to be genuinely considered as a valuable way to understand femininity, or lack thereof at the time. Well, that was significantly depressing, huh? Let's move on to a higher note. Our final story focuses on a community where women have traditionally been uplifted along with the inclusion of unique sexual practices. The Manga people are a Polynesian group where women have a distinctive role that isn't often seen across history. Women could take on a variety of positions such as a spiritual leader and the role of a wise woman. Sorceresses and becoming mediums between the mortal and spirit world were particular roles women could assume. While men were still prevalent in leadership, women were allowed their own agency in society. What is particularly interesting about the Manga is their sex practices, which prioritized women's satisfaction. At about 13 or 14, the young boys are taught by the elder woman about how to properly please a woman. A certain technique is taught to achieve maximum satisfaction from their female counterpart. Similarly, the girls are taught how to better satisfy themselves as well as learning techniques to help their partner. While this alone is already a massive divide between traditionally Victorian views on sex, the women of the Manga also hold a large influence over sex socially. If a man couldn't satisfy his partner, the women could go on and ruin his reputation. As they say, if he can't get the job done, he's gotta get gone. The teenagers of the Manga are expected to have many sexual experiences early on, as sex is really only prevalent in adolescence in this culture. As they get older, the supposed passion fades, and this chapter of their lives begins to slow down. While these ideals are vastly different from that of other cultures, it's important to remember that there are unique sexual traditions all over the world, especially ones where women play a different role. It serves as a reminder of the diversity all around us. The stories I have shared with you today may be wild and almost unbelievable to think that the world used to consider these ideas as truths. All things considered, it's important to acknowledge them and how far we've come since. After all, without our past, who would we be now? So like the name of the assignment says, spread the word. Go tell your friends about the truths of the vibrator or how Sigman Freud is generally a creep. And yeah, that's all I got for you today. See ya.